President of the Parliament, President of the Commission, Minister, ladies and gentlemen. These are times of high emotion. Feelings are running very high. We need to call to the voice of reason here. We need to move past the emotions that are caused by the tragic events that we've been seeing. We've all firmly condemned the undescribable horror of the attacks suffered by Israel, the attacks against the civilian population, which left so many dead, that have affected so many defenseless people when they were celebrating life, and they suddenly found themselves faced with death. Let's say it again. Let's condemn these attacks again, and let's say that, of course, Israel has the right to defend itself. Anyone attacked in this brutal manner would have that right. I think we also stand together to say that the right to defend yourself, like all rights, has limits, and these, in this case, are marked by international law, in particular international humanitarian law. All of this is clear, and we can repeat it, but repeating us will bring us nowhere. Yes, we condemn these terrible terrorist attacks, but I think we also have to condemn the civilian victims that we have in Gaza now. There are around 3,000 of them, because condemning one tragedy shouldn't prevent us speaking out against another. We condemn the terrorist attacks, but that doesn't stop us showing our feelings for other victims. These are tragic times, and I think that at this time the European Union needs to base its response on 4 principles: firmness, humanity, consistency, and a proactive political attitude to the conflict. Being firm begins with a clear condemnation of Hamas. And as the Minister said, they should not be identified with the people of Palestine. For us, Hamas is a terrorist organisation, and they've shown that we're quite right to call them that with their acts of recent days. Hamas has been boycotting any effort to make peace. It stood against UN resolutions, it stood against resolutions from the Arab League, which provided a possible path to peace between Israel and Palestine. Hamas wants to eradicate Israel from the map. They don't want peace, they want destruction. But it's becoming impossible for the Palestinians to achieve a fair peace. They're also the victims of Hamas. But we can't make the Palestinian people and the inhabitants of Gaza can't be made responsible for the terrorist actions of Hamas. Being firm also means calling for the release of the hostages, and this links in with our second principle for action, which is humanity. Wars also have rules. Wars are terrible things. And what we've seen, this bomb explosion in the hospital, which we don't yet know to whom it should be attributed, is another terrible manifestation of what goes on. But war has to be carried out in line with international rules, and we've said it in other contexts. Cutting water supplies and food off from civilian populations isn't in line with the rules of war. There's no water coming into Gaza now. Over 3,000 dead, over a quarter of them children. We cannot make the people of Gaza responsible for the terrible actions of Hamas. The third principle, political coherence. And I think it's fair to say that all of us agree on what I've just said. We reject Hamas, and we want to see international humanitarian law respected by all sides. We want to see attacks against defenceless civilians end, regardless of where they are. And we need to ensure that the actions of member states are in line with the common action of the European Union, and we need to ensure that EU policies are in line with what we want to see. And this raises the issue of assistance to the Palestinian Authority and the issue of humanitarian assistance to the victims in Gaza, and the decision of the President of the Commission to multiply our humanitarian aid by 3 is a good example of this political coherence. Unfortunately, obviously, humanitarian assistance needs to get into Gaza, and it can't at the moment because all ways in are closed. The Egyptian foreign minister has asked again and again for the bombardments against infrastructure to stop so that humanitarian aid could go into Gaza. The fourth principle is the one that we need to invest most political energy into, I think, which is a proactive attitude to resolve the conflict. I was in Gaza in 2008 during the attacks that took place then. I've now observed 4 wars like this one, and I firmly believe that if we don't stop the cycle of violence, it'll happen again in a few years' time. We need to end this conflict between Israel and Palestine, because peace between Arab countries and Israel, which is good news, doesn't automatically bring peace between Israel and Palestine, which needs to be achieved. An Israeli reservist who was called up said to the press that the most powerful army to defend his country would be peace. While there's no peace, there'll be no army that's powerful enough to guarantee Israel's peace. But peace will not come about automatically. Peace has to be built. We should recognise that the international community of which we're a part has not done everything necessary to ensure that the Oslo agreements, which are now 30 years old, be implemented. We've on a daily basis called for a 2-state solution. But as the UN stated, what are you doing to achieve that, apart from calling for it? Since Oslo, the number of settlers in the occupied territories has multiplied by 3, and the geographical area for a possible Palestinian state has been cut to a series of non-connected areas. The solution seems far away and it looks difficult to implement, but we don't have any alternative. If there aren't 2 states, there'll just be 1. And how would people live in this single state? How would people live together? What would the conditions for life be? We have one solution, so we need to mobilise our political energy, of which we have a great deal in Europe, to build it. Normalisation of relations with Arab countries is not enough. And with this attack, it's possible that Hamas wanted to provoke an Israeli attack, which would make it impossible to have normal relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That may well have been one of its strategic objectives. It wasn't simply a crazy attack. It's a strategy to prevent moves towards peace. We've been working with our Special Envoy for the Middle East, Sven Kuhlmann. We've been working with Jordan, Egypt, the Arab League, Saudi Arabia, to relaunch a process that can lead us to this 2-state solution. We need to recalibrate and increase our efforts in the United Nations. There are 60 countries, all of them in favour of this solution. So today we should commit ourselves to this, and this would be the best way of honouring the dead on both sides. We should commit ourselves to building peace, which requires a political framework that has already been agreed. The UN resolutions necessary are already in place. All it needs is a political boost, which Europe can make a contribution to. In the Security Council today, we'll be debating a resolution presented yesterday by Brazil, which will be voted on today. And what we vote on in the Security Council and the way in which we communicate on the conflict is going to determine Europe's role in the world for many years to come. This morning I heard the mosque of Al-Azhar in Egypt, and there's a great deal of concern now, because what they said shows that we're moving towards a conflict between the Muslim and Christian worlds, and we can't have that, because security on our streets depends on us preventing that. Geopolitics depends on us preventing that conflict. We've made massive efforts to preventing the conflict moving further, to being extended towards Lebanon. I've spoken to many ministers during recent days. In Oman, we achieved a joint communication between the countries of the Gulf and the countries of the European Union. And I think it's that communication that should guide our action. Humanity and a political commitment to moving out of this solution and building a lasting peace. That's what we should be doing. Thank you.
Representative, I give the floor now to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.